How's it going, guys? My name's Ted Sutton, and you're listening to Direct Answers from Corporate Direct. In this video, we're going to talk about why you must have a registered agent when you set up an entity. So, what exactly is a registered agent? Well, it's an address that you list with the Secretary of State that's there to accept any form of government mail. So this can be annual filing fees from the Secretary of State's website, it can be any tax forms from the IRS, or, and most importantly, it can be notice of any lawsuits, whether they come from state or federal court. And receiving notice of those lawsuits is what we call service of process. Now, having a registered agent is really important because when you set up an entity with any Secretary of State in any of the 50 states, you're required to list a registered agent address before your entity can be formed. Now, you can use your residential address as your registered agent, but you could also use a professional registered agent service like we offer at Corporate Direct. So, while you could use your residential address, we recommend using a professional registered agent service. Why do we recommend using a professional registered agent service? Well, first of all, if you use a professional registered agent service, it's one of the formalities that courts look at in a veil-piercing case. What exactly is a veil-piercing case? Just a brief rundown, if you have a business and somebody sues your business, they may try and pierce the proverbial corporate veil to hold you liable. But in order to pierce that veil between your corporation and yourself, the court looks at a series of formalities that companies follow. And if you follow more of the formalities, you're less likely to be held individually liable for the debts of your business. And if you use a professional registered agent service, you're less likely to be held individually liable. So that's why we recommend using a professional service for that. So what happens if you end up deciding to use your home address for service of process? Well, a lot of the times, service of process occurs between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. in a lot of jurisdictions. So if the process server, for instance, if you were to use a professional registered agent service, the registered agent would accept service of process and then notify you immediately. But if service of process occurs between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. and you list your residential address, there's a good chance that you may not be home and you may not get notice that there's a lawsuit being filed against your company. And when this happens, you run the risk of having a default judgment entered against you. So, what exactly is a default judgment? This is where a plaintiff can go to the court and say, look, I've tried to serve this person, but he hasn't responded. And in that instance, the court may enter a default judgment against you, meaning that you failed to appear, however, you're still liable to the plaintiff in the amount of whatever the judgment was. Now, do you want to be in this situation? Of course not. When you get sued, you want to make sure that you're notified as soon as possible that the lawsuit's being filed against your business. So, if you have a professional registered agent service, you don't have to run the risk of having a default judgment be entered against you. And it's also one of the formalities that courts follow in a veil-piercing case. It's better to have a professional one as opposed to using your home address. I'll see you next time. You're still here. Well, before you go, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on that notification bell, and if you have any general and appropriate questions about anything, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you want a free 15-minute consultation from Corporate Direct, make sure to click the link in the description below for that. Since I'm an attorney, I have to say this. Watching this video is not legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship has been formed by you engaging in my content.